Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Yes, this is the sixth time you've seen me today. Thank you so much for always showing up. Guys, they say don't ever meet your heroes. That's bullshit. This gentleman here is one of my heroes and one of my mentors, has one of my favorite top five podcasts of all time. He's done it all, been there. And whenever I'm looking for advice or guidance, he's the man that I go to. But first, I want to thank Roland Ritchie for everything he's doing for me and hopefully also for my brother. So, Tracy, my brother, welcome to the show. And how are you doing today?
Man, Richard, like I was saying earlier, man, you're going to make an old man blush. But I am doing three shades of wonderful, man. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
And I'm very grateful. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time. And I want to thank you. You were the first person to buy my new book. The new book is now number one on Amazon in podcasting. So I just want to say thank you so much. Guys, if you want to learn how to podcast, brand new book out there. You buy it for $30, you get $1,000 worth of bonuses. So write book down below if you're interested. But Tracy, you've been through a lot of shit in your life.
You could say that.
You've had the three Ds: drugs, divorce, death. You've been through a lot. So your life hasn't always been all Skittles, rainbows, unicorns.
No.
So what is your definition of resiliency?
Oh, man. I think my definition of resilience is going to be pick your ass up, dust your ass off. And like, what was it? What was the show? The claymation show? I think it was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer when he said, "You got to put one foot in front of the other." Right.
Yeah.
And soon, yeah, you're right. I won't sing. It's all good. But really, that's what it's all about. It's about standing up, taking a step, and repeat. And I think inside of that, you have to be willing to turn around and look back into your darkness, right? I call it your darkness. You could call it your learning opportunity. Look back into your abyss and, try to learn the lessons of whatever it is that knocked you down in the first place.
I love it. Now, if my camera goes out, I've been having problems with my camera all day. We're going to keep rolling. So tell us a little bit about, where you come from, where'd you grow up, and how did you become the force that you are? And then, of course, I'm going to ask questions about Coca-Cola. I'm going to ask questions about being a Terp, University of Maryland. So we're going to go back in the Wayback Machine. We're going to hop into the DeLorean and go way back.
Right
So
on.
tell me a little bit about you.
I'll give you the cliff notes so that we can dig in wherever you want to. I mean, I was blessed enough to be. I'm a third generation military man. My grandfather was in the military. My dad was in the military. My dad was in the military for 23 years. So I grew up all over the United States. We moved like every 2 or 3 years. Even spent like 6 years over in Germany. And when my dad retired, I was just becoming a teenager. We're starting to test the boundaries of things. So what does my dad do? Is he retires in Southern California, not just the most liberal place in the country, probably the most liberal place on the planet. So I went from structure to no structure. And started doing the whole cliche California thing: surfing, cars, girls, drugs.
What part of California?
About 16 miles north of Mickey's house. So it's called Norwalk.
Yep.
And
well.
there. Yep. And so right out of high school, I joined the service. And I joined the service right out of high school because I was headed down a path that was probably not going to end well, right? I was hanging out with the wrong folks, doing the wrong things. So I figured this would probably be an opportunity to get my life together. And so from there, when I signed up, they said, you get one choice. You could either pick your first duty station or you pick your MOS. And I said, well, shit, that's easy. I want to go to Germany. They're like, well, shit, if you want to go to Germany, you can pick your first duty station and your MOS. Because I wanted to go back to where I was just had been spending the last couple of years before my dad retired. And I ended up being stationed about 60 miles south of that in Schweinfurt, Germany, and had a great
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Did 4 years over there, came back, decided not to re-up, and came back, and I started a little programming business in Southern California right at the dot-com boom. So I can continue the story,
Well,
or
first, I want to go back because, first of all, I was 17 years old in Oktoberfest in Germany, life changing.
yes,
My whole world changed when I was
yes,
actually at Oktoberfest in Germany. So Germany has a place in my heart. But why? What MOS did you choose, and why? And when you were growing up, because you were moving around a lot, is that when you started getting into tech early?
I did. I started getting into tech early, not because we were moving around. I was just one of those kids that was always trying different things. My parents said you can be anything you want to be, and I actually believed them. And so I was that cliche kid that was building the ramps and jumping my bike, and I even took it so as I built a ramp tall enough for me to jump over cars. We're talking about the Evil Knievel days here, right? So I was doing that. We built a ramp, and I went from one side of my house. I put the ramp at the other side, and I jumped across the gap between the two houses. So I was just always doing these crazy, insane things, building and testing and trying things. I was doing stop motion cameras. I was into martial arts, and I was one of the oldest kids on the block. Dad retired, and I was trying to teach the other kids martial arts. Because, like I said, I was the oldest, and they were like, and we're talking about this is the time of Bruce Lee, so martial arts was a big thing. And I tried the normal, stand in the middle of the line and run them through the katas. And, they're young kids, right? Some of them weren't even teens yet. Their attention span was like less than a goldfish. And so I thought, how could I get these kids more involved? Now, anybody who's as old as we are probably remembers Sunday afternoon, maybe Saturday afternoon, B-rated martial art movies that were
Oh
on.
my God! Yes,
The guys
where they're
flying all over the place. Yeah, all
backflipping
those.
over houses and stuff like.
Yes, doing all those crazy things,
Yeah.
right? And so my mom and dad had an 8 millimeter camera in the tripod, and they let me borrow it. And we started setting up fight routines. And so we'd have 4, 5, 6 kids going through, and they would learn these whole routines. And what they didn't realize in doing all that, they were doing the exact same thing. I just made it fun. And then we'd go down to the photo mat and we'd turn it in and wait for it to come back 2 weeks later. And then we'd have like a viewing party at one of the kids' houses, and put the big silver screen up and the projector and be eating popcorn watching our fight scenes. And so this almost made me like started to birth the leader in me as well, because I just happened to be the oldest, so I was doing a lot of the acting in the scenes as well as the choreographing and the teaching, and just it was this whole burgeoning. And then when computers came out, I didn't have one, but my neighbor did. And I couldn't afford to go get one. So I started hustling to the point of I was able to go get a kit down at Radio Shack and build my first little computer. And while I was building it, I saved more money to get the little expansion pack. So now I could have like 16 megabits or 16 kilobits of memory and put that on there. And then I learned BASIC and I started programming. And a year and a half after that, I joined the service, and now I had a few pennies in my pocket, and I started doing those crazy learn by correspondence mail courses.
Yeah.
And they had one about computer programming. So I started learning, and I literally programmed my job into the computer that I built just a few years prior, and I started doing my job. And then I started learning more about computers, and learned some of the early hacking techniques. And they're like, "Oh, you have a gift for this. Let us
But
get
what?
you to
But
do."
what field? What MOS did you choose and
I
why?
went
But
in.
it
I
seems
went
like
in
you
as a.
were,
I
it
went
seems
in as
like
a
you were,
75 Echo, which
it
is
seemed like
a.
you were a free thinker. So what is it
I
like
was a free
being,
thinker, right? Which is
then joining
really,
the
really. You
military?
joined the service. Why did you do that? um,
Exactly.
I went in. I went as a 75 Echo, which, for layman's terms, is a records clerk. So whenever you needed to get something done in the military, you'd come to the regional personnel center, the office building, and a bunch of us, ladies and gentlemen, would be sitting there doing different tasks. I had the exciting job of being what's called the flagged records clerk. So if you're in the military, in any branch of the service, and you do something that gets you into trouble, your 201 file, which is the little file that everybody gets when they're in the military, would come to my desk until that trouble was resolved, whether it was a Article 15 or you just did service or you got a chapter, whatever it was. I made sure that you didn't get promoted, you didn't get a raise, you didn't go on leave, you didn't go AWOL. And AWOL, if you went on AWOL, you had your record as well. So I knew all the gossip on the on the base because of my job, and I got to keep up on everything. So it was a fun job, but it was a little bit boring, which is why I started doing more of the computer side of things. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So
And
my
then
record, my record was probably that big, my folder. So
it's funny to see the thing that people would get in trouble for, some of the stupid things, and then you would start noticing trends in different units. Maybe the NCO of a particular unit was less lenient than others. You'd see, oh, all these guys over in this unit are all getting popped for hash in Germany. They didn't have pot. You could only get hash over there. Well, every other unit is like, yeah, whatever. They're just like, it's one of those, it's like drinking, ladies and gentlemen. Not that I'm condoning doing drugs, but you start seeing those trends, and then you see some of the really bad things that people are capable of in real life that they never show you on TV or talk about in the newspapers.
So did you start incorporating what you were learning from the correspondence courses into your job, and how was that taken?
I did. It was taken very well, actually. I mean, because I was actually able to do my job and then start learning a new MOS of computer programming. And I started doing all kinds of cool things while I was in the service right before I left. And they probably would have moved me into a full-time computer position and really just changed my MOS altogether. But I decided not to re-up, so that never happened. But it did certainly empower me when I left the service and went back to Southern California, because I had all these amazing programming skills. And I had this, I'll call it a knack for here. Let me give you this example in a story. So when I left the service, the first thing I didn't do was start a little company to do programming this. What I did do was look at the want ads for businesses that were looking for a programmer or a computer analyst, either one of the two. And I found this one little cool company. I don't even know if they're still around there. I believe it was called McGill. And they were a billing company for anesthesiologists. And they wanted someone to come in and program their business on a mini frame. And I'm like, okay. And they said what the language was. And the language was called RPG2, right? Report Generator 2. And I didn't know that language. So here's what I did. I sent them my resume and I put down in there some examples, but never said that I didn't know the language they were looking for. You with me?
Yep.
And then what I did is I went to this cool little bookstore that was like one of those hidden gems in downtown Los Angeles that was just focused on tech. And I found one of these 3-inch books on RPG 2 and 3, right? And it said beginner to expert. And I sat down over a week or two and just devoured the book and started, writing notes and writing example code and writing everything. So when I got that interview, I had all these samples of code that I had scribbled on, into journals and what have you, to show them. I said, here's some of the things I was thinking. And I just kind of brainstormed. If I was a doctor and I needed some billing, if I was this doctor billing company, here's the things I think I would need. I knew nothing about this industry of billing for anesthesiologists. I just said, okay, well, they're going to need to take some import records. They're going to need to track different types of billing. They're going to need to do billing statements, right? And I just kind of wrote some base code for these things. And I said, here's some of the things I was thinking of as soon as I sent my resume to you guys. And here's some of the code. And that sold them 100%. Now, mind you, once I got hired, I had to, own up and not own up, but I had to perform and start writing code, and it worked and started doing good things. So it was, I think what the thing I'm trying to get to is, because I've always been willing to go out there on the edge, sometimes going out there on the edge means you don't know what's behind door number 2. So you just have to kick that damn door open and go, ta-da, here I am. Let's do this. And yeah, sometimes you're going to end up with mud in your face. Sometimes you're going to look like the shining superhero.
And okay, so let's talk about that. Let's dig down a little bit deeper, because obviously, we're both in the same niche. We're both podcasters.
Yeah.
And you're, like I said, you're my mentor. You're somebody I look up to. But now that I have students and I teach my students, and I hear the excuse, well, I don't have the perfect camera. I don't have the perfect microphone. And I tell people, listen, some of Gary Vee's most popular videos were made on a flip cam at a yard sale.
Yes.
So I think imperfect action is better than no action. So talk about that, because you didn't have the perfect action because you didn't even know the code, but you're like, I don't know the code, but I'm going to know the code.
Right. And I think that comes from a confidence in myself, right? And generally when people are making excuses like that, whatever the excuse, I don't have the right camera, I don't have the microphone, whatever the excuse, it usually comes down to some story that they're telling themselves, right? And they have to get past that story, or they have to take that story to its next chapter. And the only way to do that is to try it. You go back and look at some of my videos, on YouTube way back, 10, 15 years ago. Ugh. And so people still tell me, oh man, I got some great gems from that. Okay, I'm glad, but it doesn't matter. So what you have to do is just step out. Here's one of the things, and like you said, you were telling me before you hit the record button, I say this a lot on my podcast, and I say this a lot to a lot of the folks that I teach and talk to. You don't have to jump out of your comfort zone 20 feet. You just have to put your little pinky toe out there a little bit for a very short period of time, and then pull it back, and then put it out there again, and then pull it back. And then maybe you decide, okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll put my big toe out. Maybe I'll put my whole foot out, and then back. And what happens is every time you do that, your comfort zone gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And here's what generally happens. Anyone listening, go ahead. And if you're doing anything else right now, go ahead and lean in and listen to this. Those that are willing to go ahead and jump out of their comfort zone, even for 5 seconds, and then step back in, they find their comfort zone goes way out immediately. It just, boom, it just goes way out there really fast. But you've got to be willing to put yourself out there. And I, trust me, as willing as I am to walk around with egg on my face, I have fallen victim to the same thing. My first podcast was doing great. And the first podcast, Your Success DNA, I built it up. And the whole premise of it was all personal development tips. And then what I started doing is on Mondays, and each one of these episodes are maybe 15, 20 minutes long, right? So on Monday, it was free to everybody. I put it out there to the world. But at the end of the Monday show, I would tease what I'm going to talk about on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But the only way you got access to those was through a paywall. And trust me, 10, 12 years ago, it was not easy to put a podcast behind a paywall and still enable them to listen to it on Apple Podcasts. But we figured out a way to do it, right? So here I was putting out these amazing gems of, hey, here's how to make your life better. And about 2 years in, my life was falling apart. I was going through a wicked, nasty divorce, getting ready to file bankruptcy, right? It was just all this shit was going on. And I felt like a complete poser. So what did I do? Did I step out of my comfort zone and tell everyone? Nope, I didn't. I hung up my microphone. I hung up my headphones and I stopped doing the podcast. I wish I hadn't. Today, I know I could say with complete certainty, if I'd go through something like that right now, I would keep talking. I would keep sharing. Some people would listen. Some people would go, oh my God, I can't listen to this anymore, which is fine, right? But my point is, because I stopped talking, I lost, I think, some credibility, right? Because I could have gone on the microphone and said, all right, everyone, here's what's going on. I'm going to keep giving you these gems. And here's why. Because my life is shit right now. And I'm using the very tactics I'm telling you to rebuild myself. And I'm going to take you on the journey with me. I would have brought so many more people in at such a deeper level if I'd have done that. Instead, I went radio silent. Now, I've picked that podcast back up and explained to them what happened, but I lost all that momentum. It's all gone. So it's one of those wicked lessons that, man, even someone like me who's willing to go do these crazy things and put myself out there and stand on the stage in front of 2,500 people, I still had a moment of, oh my God, I don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but what's amazing is, and I'm the worst podcaster in the world, and I talk about it in the book. I had 300 episodes recorded and released on Spotify or Anchor, never even realizing it was never even on iTunes.
Oh,
and when I went to go tell them to put it on iTunes, they're like, wait a minute, you have over 450 hours of recorded podcasts. We're not putting that
right.
on iTunes. So I started all over again. But once you've already done something and you know the process, now all you have to do is fix what needs fixing and repeat the process, right?
Yeah.
So once you started over again, you knew what to do and what not to do, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. It was a lot easier going in that second time around. But I still, here's the magic. I still went ahead and got a coach, right? Because the industry had changed a bit and I wanted to not go slow because of the changes I was unaware of. So I went ahead and got a coach and went through the process as if I had never done it before. And, which was a lot easier because I already had an idea of what it is I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And so all I was really doing is making these tweaks. I was dialing things in. And I still changed my podcast 3 times over 2 years. So you keep learning. It's like life. It's an evolution. So go ahead, jump into the mud, get yourself dirty, and just enjoy the mud bath. Rolling around with the pigs. It's fine.
Yeah, and like if anybody that bought my book, if you look at the back cover, it's actually written by the #1 entrepreneur podcaster in the world, John Lee Dumas, which is my mentor and my teacher. And I think he's making like 250,000 a month on his podcast. But I had to humble myself and I had to say, John, I'm a veteran. You're a veteran. You're the podcaster. I'm a podcaster. I need your help. And I actually hired him to mentor me and teach me. And I think if you want to be successful in life, sometimes we have to humble ourselves and say, I need help.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you might have to spend some money, mentorship isn't free. I know you can get something on YouTube or you can get Audible, but sometimes if you want to reach the top levels, you might have got to put out a little money out of your pocket, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's what I used to say, especially in my corporate world, and I still say it today. You can have it cheap You can have it inexpensive, you can have it fast, or you can have quality. But you can't have cheap, quality, fast. You get to pick two. You can have cheap, quality, or fast. You only get to pick two. So you can have fast quality, but it ain't cheap. You can have something fast and cheap, but it might not be quality. You can have quality and fast. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you can only pick two of those. And I'm all about give me quality. And if I can get quality fast, I'll put a couple of pennies into it. And quite often, if you do things right, whether it's podcasting, writing a book, or whatever, you could have some cash flow going before you publish the first episode or the first page of your book, if you're doing it right. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Generally, you're not going to find that advice free. It's just not going to happen. I know I'm giving it free right here, but generally someone's going to go, no, I'm going to keep that little secret tucked underneath my shirt right here. So there it is. There's some magic that can be had. And I think so many people are stuck thinking of podcasting like radio shows. And radio shows used to make their money with advertising. That's how they made their money. So so many folks have taken that radio show mentality and moved it into the podcasting world and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to get it to X number of downloads per episode or per month so that I can go out and ask Richard and ask John and all these other folks to be a sponsor of my show. Well, why do you want to take all the time to do all that when you could just say, you know what, I'm going to build something, a podcast around my business, my hobby. Heck, I'm just going to build it around my hobby and have the podcast pay for my hobby. Well, how would you do that, Tracy? By teaching people the things I do in my hobby. How would you do that? Well, I could create a course. I could take one-on-one clients. I could take a group client. Or watch this one. Here's one you might not have heard before. I'm going to interview someone like Richard on my podcast and say, hey, Richard, what do you do for your business? And he's going to tell me, well, I'm a podcaster. I'm like, oh, yeah, really? I've been in podcasting since 2007. Do you know that I have a process that will allow you to publish your podcast in an hour? You press record, you finish, and an hour later, you're ready to publish. Richard's going to go, really? How much does that cost? Well, it's funny you ask. And then, see, now Richard's coming to me saying, oh, I might be willing to pay for that because now he's going to get all that time back that he's spending doing post editing and publishing and putting up TikToks or whatever platforms he's putting it on. I'm just using you as an example, my friend. And he might say, well, how much is that? Well, we could go a couple of different ways. I could give it to you for 1/3 the cost if you give me a little revenue share on the amount of extra revenue I bring into your business. You feel me? Now you're not just being paid once, because if I go in there and I say, here's what it is, this is going to double your revenue, and I just want 10% of the doubled side of the extra revenue I bring in perpetuity, and all that's going to cost you is, maybe some menial upfront fees. Would you sign up for that? Right?
What color pen you want me to use?
That's what I'm saying. Anybody who wouldn't sign up for that, I think, doesn't quite understand the business of business, period. Because if I go into anybody's business with a process or an opportunity to tell them, look, I can drive X times into your business, I'm happy to do it one time, and it's going to cost you this exorbitant fee. I'll charge you $35,000, and boom, this is what's going to happen. Or I can charge you $1,000, and you give me 1% of all the extra revenue that comes in until you close your business. And if you sell it, I get X% of the sale of the business. Who wouldn't take that deal?
Yeah, and And I tell everybody, my camera's acting up, but we're gonna roll on with it.
We'll keep going.
I tell people that sponsor my show, I'm like, listen, if you sponsor my show, you know, just because your episode is on YouTube and Pinterest, you're going to be getting 5 years, 10 years down the road. You're still making money from my show because it's going to live there forever. And I'm still getting affiliate checks from interviews I done 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you approach somebody with, hey, come on the show, and I would love to promote you. What's your affiliate link? I'm not going to charge you anything, but if you make any money, kick me back some. They're making money 6 years from now from an hour episode we did 6 years ago.
Yeah, there you go.
But a lot of people just think, oh, I got to get, I have to get so many downloads. And I got 2 podcasts that are being released next week. They haven't even released yet, and they have sponsors already.
There you go. See, that's it. It's a different way of doing things. And I just think people are so, they're so narrowly focused because they see so many of the mainstream gurus. And I'm not talking about the power hitters that you have mentioned earlier. They see those mainstream gurus saying, here's how you do it. And it's like, no, that's not the best way, but okay, you can.
Okay, so let's go back to the world of Coke. Because,
sure.
I love it. And because I'm thinking of what you were saying about, cheap and easy. So if I had 2 cans of soda and I showed them to the average person, if I showed them RC Cola and if I showed them Coca-Cola, 90% of the people are going to know who Coke is. 10% of people are going to be like, what the hell is an RC Cola?
Right.
And I think a lot of it is because Coca-Cola, even though everybody knows their name, they're still marketing the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Every day, every year. So talk about that is how, because a lot of people say, oh, if you're podcasting, you shouldn't be paying for marketing. And I'm like,
yeah,
but Coca-Cola's doing it.
Yeah, that's a misnomer. Yeah, you got to market if you want people to be aware of you. And Coca-Cola is a perfect example of that. It's funny is back in my Coca-Cola days, I used to go around and do presentations at some of the local schools on career days. And part of my presentation was asking the students there, what's the number one most recognized icon/brand? And you get all different, depending on when you ask that question in time, you get different answers, right? You get Nike, you get Adidas, you get right, you get the swoosh, right. Well, according to the study, and we're talking the mid to late 90s at this point in time, the number one most recognized icon/brand was the Holy Cross. Okay. Number 2 was Coca-Cola. So they're in good company, right? But it's not, it's not because they rested on their laurels. It's because they are a marketing engine. And I actually worked in Coca-Cola North America marketing and got to see it from the inside. And they do some amazing things, and they do some amazing things to keep their name in front of their consumer. And it's not always just advertising, right? I mean, if you walk into a mom and pop shop that pours Coca-Cola and has the Coca-Cola machine there, well, generally what they'll do is Coca-Cola as a company will say, okay, you, Mr. Mom and Pop Shop, you probably pour 50,000 gallons of Coca-Cola a year. And because you pour that much, we're going to give you X number of dollars in marketing materials that you can use in this catalog. And this is a bunch of pre-printed materials. This is stuff that they're going to go out and pay for and buy anyway. So why not get it for free, right? And it's not costing the Coca-Cola company a whole lot of money because it's coming out of the revenues, the profits out of the product that's being poured at that location. And they're printing it in massive bulk quantities. So they're getting it, a tenth of a penny on the dollar. And so you'll be sitting and think about this next time you're sitting at a restaurant. That's not a name brand. Even some of the name brands do it too. But just some little mom and pop, maybe Hispanic, Mexican place or taco, whatever it is. Sit down and just kind of look around the room and tell me how many brands you see. You will see Coca-Cola or Pepsi. You will see any number of beer brands. And all of that stuff is so that they stay in your mind, so that when you're not sitting in front of that branding, you're thinking, ooh, I might want a soda. How about a Coke? Right? Because subliminally, everywhere you look, you're seeing the Coca-Cola swoosh, or you're seeing the Budweiser neon light, or you're seeing Dos Equis, right? Whatever it is. And then when they do marketing, and think about this, any of the Coca-Cola commercials you may have seen over the past decade or so, they aren't so much focused on the brand itself. They're focused on the emotion. They want to get you to feel something and then show you that bottle of Coke or show you that can of soda, right? So that you're now connecting that emotion with the brand, so that when you finally do go buy that soda or buy whatever product we're talking about and take a drink, it's eliciting that emotion all over again, and you connect it. It's a over 100-year-old brand, so they must be doing something right.
But and the one reason I wanted to bring it up, because obviously you have a background with Coke, but
Sure.
this weekend's Memorial Day,
Mm-hmm.
and NASCAR at one time was ruled by PepsiCo. The Coca-Cola 600
Yeah.
is this weekend for Memorial Day. So now when people think the red, white, and blue, they're thinking Coca-Cola, because it's the Great American Race.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it started out in Pepsi country. So they had to go neck and neck with the big dogs. Now Coca-Cola is sponsoring America's race.
Yes, and they've done that in a few strategic ways. I was there when they started that shift, that pull away from PepsiCo, and they went and got some key drivers. And of course, the key drivers they got were all the names you would know, all the names you would know back then. And they put them all over the bottles. Let's forget the fact that they put their brand on, their uniform and their vehicle, but they started putting out 6-packs with, Tom and John and their number and the race car going across the little 6-pack carrier, and then the cans would have it, and it was everywhere. It was a nationwide push, and it was the Coca-Cola family, the NASCAR family. There's that emotion, right? So now it's not just NASCAR, it's a NASCAR family. Ooh, I love my family, right? So now you're there comes that emotion. You start connecting it. You see it everywhere. All of a sudden it's like, oh, well, it's always been like this. Well, no, it hasn't. To your point, it used to be very PepsiCo dominated. Here's another thing that I learned. I learned so many cool things at my time at Coke. Thank you very much. I was there, almost 14 years? Anyway, one of the things I got to be a part of was Coca-Cola was trying to go around and displace Dr. Pepper, right? And they call that the spicy cherry. So Coca-Cola has Mr. Pibb. And so we're trying to displace Dr. Pepper and have it replaced with Mr. Pibb. Okay, cool. And then there's a lot of markets where you could do that. And there's the top 20 markets, which are the big cities. You were talking, Dallas and New York and Tampa and Miami and LA and San Francisco, those big, you get your foothold in there and it starts bleeding out. There was one market down in the Texas area where Dr. Pepper was so entrenched that the company said, you know what? We're not going to be able to displace that profitably. So they altered their marketing plan in that area and shifted the focus to Sprite. They're like, okay, we can't displace Dr. Pepper because they've done such a good job in this market. I think it was like the Dallas, Houston area. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the same marketing strategy and we're going to try and pull some market share away from Dr. Pepper and start focus and pull them into Sprite. So if I can give you something different, then I'm not competing with you on the same spicy cherry product. Does that make sense? And I was like, okay, that is brilliant. And I would have never thought of that. So now as I think, across marketing things, it's like, if I can't beat them head to head because they've done such a good job, then I have to give a completely different alternative that is better in these areas, right? And one of the things they focused on would have been the alcoholic arena, right? Alcoholic in the alcohol arena, the mixed drinks, right? So if I can go in there, and Dr. Pepper and rum was popular, they had done all these great things with drinks out there. And like, well, it's better with Sprite, right? So they started focusing on that and slowly peeled away a little bit of that market share away from Dr. Pepper as a result. It was cool to see that.
And it's amazing if you go out and somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to get a rum," what normally comes after that?
Coke. Yeah.
It's but like, and I know we're harping on this for a minute, but I just want to let people know, because branding is so important, especially in podcasting or whatever you do. But I know that with me and my wife, once we went past south of the border, we immediately went to the Piggly Wiggly or Food Lion, and we picked up Mellow Yellow.
Yes.
We knew it, it may not be popular in New Jersey, but if you get down south, Mellow Yellow has its own thing. So sometimes you don't have to be all over the place to make a lot of money. You can pick, like Steve D. Sims talked about in his book Blue Fishing. Pick the blue ocean. Don't worry about the red ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think, which is a great book. I actually enjoyed that very much, and I like the blue ocean, red ocean arena. But let's dig in there for a minute and think about restaurants. Tough industry. I'm not experienced in it, but if you think about, let's even narrow it down to fast food restaurants, right? So you've got the big hitters, the McDonald's, the BKs, the Wendy's, the Arby's, and Chick-fil-A, right? I love me some Chick-fil-A, right? Chick-fil-A is magic. Yes. Here's the thing a lot of people don't know. Who per capita is more profitable? I will pause while you think through that answer in your head. Most folks, when I ask that question, will say McDonald's. And per capita, they're incorrect. Here's the thing. Per store and per capita, Chick-fil-A blows McDonald's completely out of the water. And they do it with 8 entrees, and they don't even work on Sunday. And they don't stay open 24 hours a day. They give up hours a day, and they give up days a week for weeks of the year, and they still are able to be more profitable than the big hitter Mickey D's.
But also, I can go past Burger King. There's no line. I can go past McDonald's. There's no line.
No.
I go past Chick-fil-A. There's always a line.
Yeah. And here's one of the things. If you someone just take a minute next time you have a couple of moments, you could probably do it while we're listening right here, and open up two browser windows and look at the menu for Chick-fil-A and look at the menu for McDonald's. Which one is more confusing, right? Because if you just talk about the burgers alone, there are a number of burgers. It's like, well, why is this burger even here, right? Where you go to Chick-fil-A, it's chicken. You can have it grilled and you can have it fried. You can have it on a bun, or you can have it in pieces. Pretty much is what it boils down to. And you can have French fries. Now, of course, the drinks and the different things like that, and got a piece of cake and everything. But if you look at the ability for someone to walk into a store, look up at the menu and say, what do I want? I don't want a fried chicken. Okay, that narrows it down to grilled chicken. They've got 2 different versions of that. I'm going to have that sandwich right there. And you're done. Here's the benefit from a business standpoint. How easy is it to make chicken? Just chicken 2 different ways. Where I worked at McDonald's as a kid, And I know what that assembly line back behind that grill looks like. You got two different sides. You got a side that's making the smaller patties that will be used on the standard burgers as well as the Big Macs. And you got another side that's working on the quarter pounder patties that are used on, well, quarter pounders back then, but now it's used on a couple of different sandwiches. And then you have the fat fryers. You've got all these different things that are moving. And here's the thing about business, ladies and gentlemen, and podcasting follows suit. The more variables you insert, the more opportunity for things to break. And something is going to break. So don't have yourself a business or a podcast. I'm going to talk about whatever I feel like talking about today. Okay, well, guess what? You know, I might check you out on an episode I'm very interested in, but I'm probably not going to check you out after that because the other things I might not be digging so much. You feel me? Am I making sense here?
Oh, I'm picking up what you're laying down, brother. But also, I know that if I go to Chick-fil-A in New Jersey, if I go to
Yes.
Chick-fil-A in Mississippi, I know I'm going to be treated like a king when I get there. When I place my order, they're going to say, "Thank you, Mr. Richard, for your order. How was
Yes.
everything?" So
Yeah.
their customer service has been ranked number one so many years in advance. So there's a reason why they're number one, because they take that customer service to the next level.
Yeah. And they have a very picky process on picking the people that are running those stores. And I believe they get, I don't want to exaggerate. I heard this not too long ago. I'll say 10,000, right? Applications per year, and they'll pick 130, right? So they're very picky, and a lot of those people they end up picking are people that have worked their way up through the ranks inside the store. You know, maybe some kid teenager, she comes in, gets her first job there as a cashier. She's back there cooking. She works her way up to assistant manager. Maybe she becomes a manager, puts in her application, says, I want to own a store. Okay, well, you don't get to own the store. They own the store, but you get to run the store and have a profit share involved in that. I think that helps create a better environment because these are the people that love the business, love that interaction with their customers. So they're going to hire the kind of people they want to be around to create that kind of environment where you walk in and say, thank you, Mr. Richard. Was everything okay? You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And also, Mr. Truett Cathy also said, you guys are paying at McDonald's, you guys are paying $8 an hour. We're going to pay $12 an hour. We're going to
Yeah.
offer the benefits. We're going to make sure that they never want to leave here.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
And the turnover rate is very, very low because they feel loved and they feel appreciated.
Yeah, they have that lowest turnover rate of the fast food industry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So now, everything you've learned from Coke, how would you, working with that amazing company, how did you translate those skills from what you've learned into podcasting and being a public figure and speaker and all the great stuff that you do?
Oh my goodness. You know, in so many ways, especially when it comes to the marketing piece of things, right? It's all, like you said, branding is pretty important. And you can get it wrong and still survive. Don't get me wrong, you can. You can half-heartedly do something and as long as you have great content, people will go, okay, well, I can get past the ugly art on your podcast screen. No problem. No, I can do that. But what you don't see is that if you get the branding right and you start pulling people in before they've even heard a word you've said, right? You stop confusing them with jumbled up images. I learned things like that, and I learned a lot about A/B testing. I learned a lot about colors, and a lot about just the little nuances that make a big difference. I don't, because since we moved here, I don't have it nearby. I have a piece of Coca-Cola artwork that is that classic iconic disc what you
Yep.
see everywhere. About the mid 90s, they did a version of it that had ice on it and then dripping water and little water droplets. And the artwork was done in a very specific way so that when you looked at it, you were like, ooh, I can feel it feels cool. And I don't mean cool as in, hey, you're awesome. I mean cool as in it's iced down. And, and if anyone's had a hot summer day and popped open a bottle of Coca-Cola that's ice cold and taken that drink,
Yep.
that's what they were trying to put into the picture. That's the kind of thought you want to take and put into your artwork, that you want to put into your branding. Whether you do it yourself or you go to someone that's what they do, that's the thoughts you want to sit down and write. Here's the motion I want to elicit. Here's the message I want to try and convey with this brand, right? And if that means teddy bears and roses and rainbows and unicorns, fine. That's what works. If that means flames and demons and guitars, whatever, it works. I mean, if you look at, well, you can see behind me, one of my favorite bands, Kiss, right? 50 years,
I'm a
ladies
big
and
Kiss
gentlemen.
fan. I'm a
These
big Kiss
guys
fan, so I
rocked
love
it.
me some Kiss,
And
baby.
yeah, and so they put a lot into their imagery across those decades. And if you look at old Kiss and watch it across the years, you can see how they dialed it in. Heck, you can even see when they changed with the times. Perfect example is the costumes they had for the 80s with Dynasty was
Yep.
very glam rock / disco. Lots of, bedazzle here and floating flurly capes and very disco-esque, like bell bottoms and what have you. But then as soon as that era ended, right behind that, they went back to the more edgy kind of harder kind of feel to it. And each one of the characters personified a persona. They took on a persona on stage. Now, maybe there was a bit of them inside that persona, but it all worked together under this one big umbrella known as the Band of Kiss. And it was just this amazing thing. I'm looking forward to what they do with the avatars that they showed at their last concert, where they took the personas and turned them into 3D images. At that last concert, they kind of showed it to everybody. And I hear that they're going to be doing things like having live concerts where the personas are doing the concerts on screen. Kind of like that Ronnie James Dio 3D experience that went around for a while. Here's what I think is amazing. If I'm gonna stick on Kiss just for a second. Kiss stopped putting out new music in the early 2000s, may have been late 90s, right?
Carnival of Souls? Or,
I think there was another one right behind that.
okay.
I'm going to look it up. Let's just say the past decade and a half, maybe 2 decades, they did no music. So they've been around 50 years. So the second half of their career, they put out no new albums. Someone's going to catch me.
Psycho Circus was their last album.
Psycho Circus? Yeah. So, and what year was that?
I don't even remember.
It was in the 90s, if I remember. Yeah. Anyway, the second half of their career, basically, the second half of their career, no new music. They rested on their early catalog, which was huge. Don't get me wrong. They had a huge catalog of songs, and they still filled out arenas all the way up to last year where they did their last show. Clearly, they were doing something right. They were one of the first bands to put their name in lights on the stage behind them. Now you can't go to a rock concert or a festival and not see people putting their names up behind them, either in lights or on a some sort of backdrop or something. You can go back to look at some of these early things and go, wow, look at all the crazy things that they've done. Alice Cooper, he made a name for himself with his face makeup. Still does. and still does it. It's his image. That's the brand he put out there. And here's a little unknown tidbit. Well, except for the rock aficionados, Alice Cooper doesn't have a band. He has a bunch of hired guns.
Yep.
He every year he's going to go out. If the same people don't come back, he'll go find another hired gun. And for those that don't know, a hired gun is a musician that gets hired out to different bands for maybe a long time, maybe a short period of time. Eric Singer, the drummer for Kiss, for the past almost 2 decades now, he was a hired gun. He was the drummer for a number of other bands, including Alice Cooper for a while. So,
and he was a founding member of Badlands.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but let's talk about branding a little bit, because we can go to Kiss and we can go to Coke, where they both made a big mistake. I mean, when they unmasked on MTV, that was a big deal. But when the album Unmasked, it kind of compares to when they came out with the new Coke. The people were like, we don't want this shit. I don't care what it is. I thought it tasted better. I liked the new Coke. A lot of people didn't. But once the Unmasked came out and it reminded me of the new Coke, sometimes you don't listen to what you don't listen to what your audience is actually saying, and you put out new Coke and they're like, just return that shit back.
Well, here, let me drop a little conspiracy theory into your ear. For those that remember the new Coke, I'll call it a debacle, the new Coke experience. If you go back and look at some of the old Coke cans pre-new Coke and look at the ingredients, one of the ingredients on there is sugar or sugar cane sugar, right? Post new Coke, what does it say? Fructose syrup. So one of the conspiracy theories around the new Coke debacle was we can't just change the formula because people will notice the taste difference. However, if we introduce new Coke that has a different sweetness level, you with me? Mm-hmm. Knowing full well it's probably going to fail, they're going to rise up and we're going to say, okay, we're listening. And we're going to bring the original, he says with air quotes, formula back with the modified ingredients. Most people don't notice it. That's a conspiracy I'm going to leave out there for anyone to ponder. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, you could call it a debacle. You could also call it probably one of the most genius marketing plans in the world. Because if you weren't a Coke drinker and new Coke came out and all of a sudden you hear everybody going, yuck, this stuff is nasty, which was what most folks said, it's not as good as the original formula, would you go check it out? Maybe. You might go check it out. And then when they go back to the original formula, okay, well, I remember having an old, a pre-new Coke. Let me see if it actually tastes the same. So it's a bit of a marketing play at the same time that you could do something like that, as long as you're willing to take the hit on the chin when it comes to folks, bashing you in the public sphere, right?
Yep, and like you said, I think you also have to listen to your audience. Everybody I've talked to, and I'm a big Kiss fan. I've been a member of the Kiss Army since 1977, since seeing Madison Square Garden. But if I ever talk to any real Kiss fans, and I say, "What's your favorite album?" They almost never say The Elder, and they pretty much never say any of the 4 solo albums, except for maybe Aces, because it's not what people wanted. They don't want a concept album from Kiss.
Yeah.
There's a couple good songs on it, but I think if they would have listened to their audience, they wanted revenge. That's what they wanted.
Yes. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
But they were like, we're going to go in a different direction. And they had to return all those albums.
Well, and I think one of the things you have to, and I totally agree with you. If you ask me what the favorite album is, while I like Elder, it's not my favorite. It is. You're right. It's a complete divergence from their normal sound, let alone the fact it was a concept album that tells a story as a whole. Forget the fact that they got some of the tracks mixed up, so the story is a little jumbled. Forget the fact that who played on it, who didn't play on it during that time. Okay, let's put all that aside. In that era that album came out, music as a part of a movie was huge. Saturday Night Fever. Think of all the movies that were coming out with these massive soundtracks around them. So, from a marketing perspective and from a business even perspective, it made sense to try the project. That made sense. Should they have put it out as an album? I don't know. I still don't know. Like I said, I enjoy the music on that album. I don't listen to it as often as I listen to any other Kiss album. Period. End of story. Right there. The 4 solo albums, I totally love that they did those, because for me, it showed me who was inputting what into the final conglomeration that I had been enjoying since 1976. It's like, oh, okay, all those cool bluesy things, those are coming from Peter. All that hard hitting stuff, that's probably coming from Gene. All those amazing riffs and melodic tones, probably coming from Ace. All the feel good, fluffy is coming from Paul. You know what I'm saying? But they all have a little of that inside of each one of them. But when you listen to those solo albums by themselves, you can hear completely different. For me, I can go back and listen to the music as when they did it as a band and start seeing who inspired the song, or maybe who inspired a section kind of thing. And as a musician, I enjoy playing music and listen to music like that. I geek out like that for that reason. But for the passive listener, they're probably going, WTF? What? Right? I think the only benefit out of that is it gave each one of those members an outlet for their individual type of music that they wanted to put into the band and weren't able to for whatever reason. That may have held the band together a little bit longer if they hadn't have done that project, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, if you look at the band as a whole, and then we'll get onto podcasting in a minute,
Sure, sure.
you had Paul. You had Paul. I'm not a fan of Soul Station. I can't listen to it. You have Gene. He's doing his own thing. You have
Yep.
Eric, great drummer, has been in Alice Cooper, has been in Badlands. And then, you have the guitar player, Tommy Thayer, had an amazing band back in the 80s, Black and Blue. Amazing. I love
Yep.
their albums. And
Yep.
without, they were saying, well, the original Kiss, well, it was Tommy that kept the band going while they were going through all this shit. He was the guy
Yes.
behind the scenes
Yes.
managing. He was the one that was putting everything together. So a lot of people shit on him, but they're like, without Tommy, they wouldn't even be around today, because he did all the sign behind the scenes, especially on the video. What was it, something unmasked or something? They had a video where he did all the video for them. So he's
Yep.
been in the band longer than any of them. Well,
Yeah.
except for Gene and Paul.
Except for Gene and Paul, right? No, yeah. I can appreciate the love for the OG Kiss. I mean, I'm like you, man. I've been a Kiss fan since the 70s. I was turned on to Destroyer over in Germany, and that totally changed my outlook on music moving forward. Pre-Destroyer, I was a pop fanatic. I was listening to ABBA and Bread and, all of Donna Summer, and I was total pop. And a friend of mine says, dude, you got to listen to this. And I popped in that cassette player. I wore that cassette out. And so I have a love for OG. Ace Frehley is the reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. I don't like Ace anymore, right? I like Ace how he was back in the day. I've met Ace, been lucky to meet him in a couple of events. And I don't like him. I don't know him as a person, so I can't say anything, positive or negative about him as a person. But each of my experiences with him face to face, short or long, have been not good.
How
Never
fast do you
met
think? How fast do you think we would get canceled if we started bumping Christine 16?
pretty fast. Pretty
So,
fast.
all right.
Anyway.
So what's going on with the podcast? What do you got coming up? What's new in your world? And tell us about your new berry farm.
Yeah, so I'll start there. We, my wife and I are lucky enough to work because we want to, and we have had a dream to create what I think is known as a food forest. And go Google that if you don't know what it is. Is basically it's a way of growing your food, not just berries, but tree food and root food and lettuce foods, the whole anything that grows in the ground in one way or another. It can be done in this food forest technique. We wanted to create our own food forest. First to feed ourselves. Obviously, I like good food, and I prefer to have the food that I know doesn't have junk on it or in it. So if I grow it myself, I know what's in it. And if there's something nasty in it, it's because I put it in there. And then obviously as it matures, and like I was telling you before we hit record here, they're out there right now planting like our first 52 trees. And the trees are only 2 years old, so they're very young and probably won't sprout fruit for another year or two. But that's going to be the start of an orchard. And next to that is a whole bunch of strawberries. And then we're starting the market garden. So once that gets to the point where we have an abundance of food, the plan is to we bought 40 acres, and at the far end of one side of the 40 acres is a perfect spot to build a little community store. And we'll start selling our wares. I'm going to start doing woodworking projects. Who knows what my wife and daughter will pick up, jewelry, whatever, rock tumbling. We have a whole host of cool little stuff that we're interested in that will be part of the store as well. So, folks will keep following that journey. It'll be a couple of year journey, but it's something we've always wanted to do. And now we're finally able to do it. And we have it's just one of those amazing things. It's like, I want to do this. And we as a family kept putting it out there into the ether, praying, whether you call it praying for it, Allah, God, Buddha, Mother Nature, the universal force, whatever you believe in. We just kept putting it out there. And finally, it came to fruition. It came to fruition so fast that we saw the house listing on a Wednesday. The open house was on Saturday. We made the offer Saturday night and moved in a month later. And that's how just like that. It was an amazing ride. Inside of that, there were issues with movers that, caused consternation, heartaches, and growling moments where I just wanted to, punch someone in the face. But I made it through to the other side of that, knowing, okay, we can get through this. This is the small hiccup on the road to success. And they happen all the time, right? And when it comes to the podcast, I mean, I do the same thing you do, teach people how to podcast. I'm flipping the script a little bit on that. And I'm going to focus in on folks that are trying to start their side hustle and to teach them, how to start a side hustle if they don't have one going yet. How to get that side hustle and turn it into the full-time side hustle or a full-time hustle, and use the podcast as a voice, as that bullhorn mechanism that you and I both know that it can be. So doing the same thing, but doing it differently, right? I'm going after those little entrepreneurs that are like, how do I tell people about my little side hustle here? Well, guess what? Podcasting is amazing for that. And then you can start finding out what resonates. People are happy to come onto a podcast if you align on the same topic. Say I was going to do a podcast about a berry farm. I could get all kinds of berry farmers out here, get all kinds of amazing advice, all kinds of great things. And then on the back end, I could say, you know what? I learned this cool thing about getting my berry farm out on a podcast. Would you like to learn how to do that? You feel me? So now it's an opportunity to bring in leads technically for free, right? And it comes back to that, if I came to you and said, hey, I know how to double your business, it could cost you X, this big number, or you give me some profit share in perpetuity, it'll cost you a small number. So that means I do it once and get paid forever, which is the perfect plan for anybody listening out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just like, and I tell everybody, a lot of people see Shaq, and a lot of people don't realize that when he does a commercial, he doesn't get paid for the commercial because in order for him to make the commercial, he wants part of the pie.
Yeah. Well,
Perpetuity.
Ryan Reynolds did the same thing with Mint,
Yep.
right? Mint Mobile. That's
Yep.
how he got in there.
But the thing is with podcasters, for some reason, we all think, or not all of us, because me and you are different kind of people.
Sure.
We believe in collaboration. We believe in cooperation. We don't believe in competition. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, you're going to have another podcaster on your show? And I'm like, there's 8 billion people in this world. So he may be able to touch people that I can't.
Yeah.
Be able to touch people that he doesn't. So why don't we collaborate and make it all bigger?
Oh, and that brings up a great point right there. Is so many people say, "Oh, my industry, insert industry here, is saturated." Well, I would almost disagree. We'll come back to the red ocean, blue ocean. Maybe, and let's say, for instance, the podcasting industry is saturated. I do not agree that it is, and I would argue with anyone that would say that. Can I create a podcast that is positioned in such a way that it is a show unlike any other show? I think yes. I think that I could either bring a unique view, a unique personality, or focus in on a unique audience. Heck, if I'm smart, I'll do all three of those. And it will be a show that when someone goes to type, hey, I want to look for parents wanting to start a side hustle. You know whose show's going to pop up? Mine and 2 others. And one focuses on mompreneurs and one focuses on dadpreneurs. Okay. If you resonate with a dadpreneur only, you're going to go check out that show. If you're just like, oh, let me check this out. Now, this is where the branding piece comes in. If I can do the right branding so that when they see those 3 shows, they look at my show and go, okay, this dude, this right here I resonate with that. And it could be a logo, it could be the wording, it could be my image on there or not on there. Some people don't want to see my whiskered face. Fine. You know what I've done? I've taken my whiskered face off of every single one of the episodes. It only shows up on the show picture because it's not about me as far as I'm concerned. It's about the audience. And if you want to come on my show, you better damn well bring the fire because it's not about you either. It's about the audience. And the minute you can sit down at a chair and tell yourself, I'm going to be a servepreneur, then you are already 5 miles ahead of anyone else out there because you're going to do the things like Richard said earlier. You're going to listen to your audience. You're going to take a minute and think about what it is they want. What are their pain points? What is it they're writing in their journal? What nightmares are they having about their home, their business, their family, their whatever? And what is it they're, waking up going, shit, I got to deal with X. We'll solve X for them, and you'll have a show that everyone that has that problem wants to listen to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because like when me and John Lee sat down, and I'm like, I don't know what to start my podcast about. He's like, your perfect avatar is you 5 years ago.
Yes.
And you 5 years from now.
Yes.
And he's like, there's not a lot of people doing podcasts about veteran entrepreneurs. They might be doing one about veterans. They might be doing one about entrepreneurs, but they're not really doing one that encompasses both.
Yes.
And like you said, that's when you kind of go into a blue ocean. Because if I know I can't compete with Gary Vaynerchuk, even though we're sometimes on the same list, I can't compete with Patrick Bet-David, but I can be in my own blue ocean.
Yeah.
Not worry about everybody else, right?
Yeah. I think I heard somewhere, someone said, if you could break your podcast, and this could be in any industry. It doesn't have to be in podcasting. We just happen to be talking about podcasting. If you could break it down into one sentence, it says, I serve blank, that blank and blank. Those three things, if you can fill in those three blanks on something that is uniquely what you can serve, like right now, my podcast serves parents that are struggling to escape the 9-5 via a side hustle. Okay.
Simple.
I don't think there's that many podcasts out there focused on that. There's a whole lot of them talking about entrepreneurship. And I started there. I thought, I'm going to go out, I'm going to talk about all these entrepreneurs. Well, that's not small enough. I did okay, right? I still got a few hundred downloads an episode. I started hitting 1,000 downloads an episode in a couple of months. I did okay. But again, I started back in 2007. I got a little experience on my belt. I had the cheat code. And then I narrowed it down. I'm going, okay, now I'm just going to focus on the online entrepreneurs. A little smaller, but still pretty broad, right? I mean, you cover everything. It could be courses. It could be whatever you want to talk about. And then it hit me as I was having a conversation with someone just like you. And I realized that across about the past 10 or 12 conversations I had over the past month with listeners and guests and folks hitting me with questions, every single one of them, without exception, were a parent. Guess what? I'm a parent too. So, and now, mind you, my kids are all grown up. I still have one that lives with me, but they're still grown and they're their own independent people, which I try to teach my kids to be independent people from day one. So I could understand the problems that they went through. I understand the terrible twos and teenage angst and dating and all the craziness that happens balancing the corporate America life with the family life. I had my two daughters pull me into the kitchen as I came home from work one day when I was working at Coca-Cola, and they sat me down and said, Dad, we need to talk, which is what I used to tell them when I had to give them some educational opportunities. Right. And it was a proud dad moment and a little scary at the same time. It was a proud dad moment that they had the cojones to say, Dad, we need to talk, and sit me down and say, we love the life you've built for us. We like the fact that we have a nice home and we can go places and do things and go to Six Flags and have toys and all these great things. We would like to see a little more of you. Now, I'm putting that in my words, but that's basically what they were saying. I was spending so many hours at work trying to advance my career to be that provider that I was neglecting the very people I was doing it for. So I understand these problems that parents have to battle. It's a balance, right? There's this whole thing going on, and you start having to make choices, and these choices aren't always easy. They are when you know your value ladder and you can start picking what's more important, right? Some people say it's, God, family, and then everything starts going down underneath that. Well, please don't be offended anybody. I go family, God, and then everything else. Because I'm going to tell you what, anything comes between me and my family, me and God are going to have some words, right? Because I'm going to be protecting the family first. And if God has an issue with that, well, then we'll discuss that at the pearly gates. Anyway, so yeah, it almost hit me like this literal light bulb goes up, wing, over the head. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I hopped on the microphone and I said, here's what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, all my loyal listeners that have been around this long. I'm going to keep giving you what I think is the amazing advice I'm giving you and bringing on the folks that I'm lucky enough to bring onto the show. But now I'm narrowing my focus onto those parents that are trying to make a side hustle work, perhaps just for extra money. Maybe they love their corporate America job and they don't want to leave it, but it's not quite making the ends meet. There's not enough money at the end of the month, right? Or there's too much month at the end of the money. Anyway, so that's what I zeroed the focus in on. And I started, I saw a rise. If I brought up my charts, you could see when I made that choice, and it started going up from there, and it's plateaued again. So we'll see what happens next. I don't know if I'm going to narrow even further or just keep it where it's at right now. But I'm lucky enough. I'm blessed, and I'm thanking God for those things.
But it's smart that you have an elevator pitch, because if I talk to 75% of podcasters and I say, "Give me your one sentence elevator pitch," they don't have one. It's like, well, I talk about this, and I'm like, hold on. Like
Just
for
not,
me, my elevator pitch is I help veterans struggling in life and business.
there you go.
And
That's
I
it.
know, like in my phone, my wife thinks I'm stupid. I actually have a picture of of a veteran and his wife and 3 kids in my phone, and
Yeah.
I call him Craig. So I know that whenever I come on, I'm trying to solve Craig's problems.
Well, and therein is this that's secret sauce right there. Mine is Emily Johnson. Right. When I sat down and did the avatar, I created a male version and a female version. And I don't know, I resonate with the Emily Johnson piece of it. And what's really funny is that when I went through the avatar creation process, and something I teach my students, and I'm sure you do as well, I went through and thank you, AI, for stepping into the world because it makes this process so much easier. Emily Johnson is a mid-tier marketing manager. Well, guess what I was at Coca-Cola? I worked at Coca-Cola North America as a marketing manager. It was so this just comes back to what John was telling you. My avatar is who I was yesterday. And yesterday in my case would have been 20 years ago now, but still. And she's got 2 kids. I had 2 kids back then, making decent money. I was making decent money, but and then here's her likes, here's her dislikes. So many of those, and mind you, I didn't type this in and say this is what my avatar. I just started asking the questions and getting the data, and then re-asking the questions again and getting the data, and then working with ChatGPT with this data and these questions, and getting this, oh my God, moment of this is who I'm talking to. And then I went to DALL-E with this information. I said, I need an avatar that fits this description. And so I don't have it on my phone yet, but I do have it with my avatar sheet that I sit there and I look at. Quite often, I'll have it up here on the screen when I'm doing the podcast, because that's who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Emily and I'm talking to Eddie, and trying to help them with their problems. I could get on the microphone and talk all day long about business and about personal development. Sure, why not? But I like to talk. I was in Toastmasters for 12 years, and I was the president of the Toastmasters Club and the governor, and I got all these awards because I love public speaking. So this is, to me, is just another avenue to use that expression of voice. But if I channel it, that's where, for me, where the magic happens. I'm going to channel it towards those folks and try and solve their problems, and literally try to think of what journal entry my Emily is going to be writing in her journal before she lays her head down to go to sleep tonight. What is she worried about? What wakes her up in the middle of the night and goes, oh shit, I need to solve this? And that's what my next episode will be about. Now, of course, I use all the tools that are out there that will help me find those questions easier, Google and Bing, and, answer the public and all these things. But I always filter it back through that avatar. Does that make sense?
Yep. And guys, if you're not using ChatGPT 4.0, oh my God,
You were
game
falling
changer.
behind.
So I'm just wanted to say that. So how do we find your podcast? How do we follow you? How do we support your mission? But I got to say, you and your bride's mission, because it's all about the team. And
yes.
so
I would not be where I am at today without my amazing lady. Let me tell you what, she's an amazing woman. And her name's Diane. I just have to put that out there. The easiest way to find me is darkhorseschooling.com as the website. The podcast is always updated there. The socials all across the top of the screen. Feel free to reach out. Very active on Facebook, where you and I hang out quite a bit. But you'll see me across all the other platforms as well. I utilize AI and the AI tools that are out there to take my stuff and put it on all the platforms. But I focus in on where I know my folks are at, which are Facebook and LinkedIn.
Me too. And I love your LinkedIn profile, by the way, guys. If you get a chance, make sure you check out his LinkedIn profile. It's fire. I love it. And once again, I want to thank Roland Ritchie. You're amazing. Without you, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And you introduced me. So I just want to publicly say thank you. And
thank you, Roland.
And I just, Tracy, I just want to say, brother, I'm truly humbled and grateful for your friendship. And thank you for always being there. Whenever I have a question, you never say, hey, dumbass, look it up for yourself. You're always there for me. So I just want to publicly say thank you.
I definitely appreciate it, man. I've been on the other side of the coin, so I appreciate that folks are coming and asking me those questions. I'll happily answer them anytime.
I love it, brother. I'm so grateful for you. And guys, make sure you check out Tracy. He's so affable, especially on Facebook and LinkedIn. Check out his podcast. It's on my top 5 podcasts of all time. So make sure that you check out his podcast. Tracy, my brother, thank you so much and have an awesome week.
You do the same, my friend. This has been fire. It's been fun.
I love it. And guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. Love you guys. Have an amazing week. And like Kiss says, keep on rocking. All right, brother. Be good.
You too.